Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to another Adobe XD Masterclass. My name is Howard Pinsky, Senior XD Evangelist here at Adobe. Hope you're all doing well on this Friday afternoon. Hope you're all excited for the weekend. I know I certainly am. If you are tuning in live here on Behance today, let me know in the chat who you are and where you're tuning in from. We've got My voice just went pew. My voice is ready for the weekend, clearly. Umacorn and Philip from Germany, Cornell and Tim and Wade. Tim is already talking about banning people. Amazing. Gareth, great to see all of you. Sweet. All right. So, Masterclass number 73 is upon us. We got Bohan from Serbia. Great to see people from all over the world. We're going to go ahead and dive straight into today's Masterclass. It's going to be a fun one. Don't know if we're going to get through the entire thing, but what we are going to be tackling today is a video player. Now, obviously, hey Sam, great to see you. Obviously, we released video and Lottie support a few weeks ago at Adobe MAX. Cheryl from Florida. Cheryl has the best last name in the world, Cheryl Howard. And Renee, great to see you as well. So we released video and Lottie support, and we've been covering a lot of different use cases for video and Lottie. And today we're going to kind of bring all of that together, and we're going to create a video player. And I did release this preview a few weeks ago. It's a little bit pixelated because Twitter still hasn't figured out how to compress videos and encode them properly. It's there, I promise. Actually, you know what we're going to do is I'm going to show you the actual thing, because this is just pixelated and not very good. But before we dive into XD very quickly, I do have a few new videos since the last Masterclass. Specifically, I think some of you might remember the kind of hack that I showed last time. I did upload a video showing that off, and maybe I'll touch on it today, maybe I won't, but youtube.com/Howard Pinsky, you can go ahead and see it there. But let's go ahead and hop over to Adobe XD, and let me bring this over a little bit. I'm going to bring this preview over so you can see what we're going to be working on today. It's a video player, right? But what's cool about this is not only does the video play, but there's also hover effects that you can incorporate. And if you can notice down here, there's little hover effects on these ones as well. We have Lottie animations. We have some hover effects over here. We have exploding confetti, because of course we do. And what's really nice about this is the video actually persists as you expand or hide the chat, as long as it's all built into a single component, which is really cool. So we're going to be diving into hopefully all of that stuff today. We'll see how far we get. But if anyone has questions about video, Lottie, whatever it might be, definitely let me know in the chat. I will be taking a peek from time to time. Hey Chris, great to see you. We've got John from the UK. I love the UK. I went to London, when was that? 2013, I think it was. Almost 10 years ago. That's crazy. And one of my favorite places. Brett from Canada. We've got Giovanni from Colombia. Bill from Cameroon. Awesome. The crispiness of my... Yeah, see, I don't... Let me try to lower this. I'm going to lower the volume a little bit. Maybe that'll help. Something is going on with my mic. Hold on. Okay. So recently I got, not that this matters, but I got a new mixer, and I don't know, it's just not working as well as it should. But hopefully I did lower the gain a little bit. Hopefully that's a little bit better. But Howard Peaksy. Well done, Tim. But let me know if this is a little bit better. All right. So we're going to start with a 1920 by 1080 pixel artboard today. Mainly because, video players, we typically see them on things. Peaks are gone. Ooh, very good. Okay, so it looks like 2 dots is the sweet spot. I'll figure that out later. It was working fine. It sounded okay beforehand. Anyways, doesn't matter. So video players, we typically, they're 16 by 9 aspect ratios. A lot of times we're on YouTube on the desktop, or Behance right now on the desktop as well. And it's typically designed at 16 by 9, so 1920 by 1080 is a pretty good starting point. So what we're going to do, we're going to first start by laying out some of these elements. So I'm going to go for a nice dark feel to this particular page, like you saw in that preview. Hello from Ukraine, great to see you, Nadia. All right, so I'm going to switch over to a nice dark background just like this. I'm going to name this artboard Video Player. Bam. Hey, Hitisha, great to see you as well. All right, so we have a nice dark background, and we're not going to spend too much time on the surrounding elements because we definitely want to get to the good stuff, which is the video player. But right at the top, we might want some sort of a navigation bar. So with the rectangle, I'm going to just draw out a little bit of a placeholder just for now. And I'm going to change the color of this a little bit lighter than the background. Just so it's kind of there, but it's also not really there. Again, we don't want to focus too much on that. And, ideally there would be a few different elements, a profile, an upload button, logo, search. But let's go ahead and create the actual video container. Now, like I mentioned, videos are typically 16 by 9. Of course, if you're designing for a platform like TikTok or Instagram stories, that may change. But if we're looking at a platform like Behance or YouTube, it'll be 16 by 9. Now, one thing you can do, we have 1920 by 1080 as the overall dimensions. So if I just draw out a rectangle here, inside of my properties inspector over here to the right, I'll do something like 1280 by 720. That way I have a nice starting point, and I know that that ratio is 16 by 9. And I can also lock that ratio within the properties inspector as well. And then if I needed to, I can always enlarge a little bit. And we are going to have a little bit of room on the right-hand side for our chat window, or a chat module, whatever you want to call it. And we actually designed one a few weeks ago, I believe, when we were designing the gaming experience. So we may just grab that, kind of bring it on over. So we have the container right here for our video player, which is looking pretty good. And then right underneath, we may want a little bit of information just to fill out this space. And we can also extend this artboard outwards a little bit so that we can have maybe some recommended videos at the bottom. But let's assume for a moment that maybe this particular video is a live stream for Adobe XD. Very meta, right? And not meta like the Facebook meta, but meta. I don't know. So I'm going to draw out a rectangle or a square. I'm going to round out the corners a little bit. And actually, I do have in one of my Creative Cloud libraries, I do have a logo, an XD logo right over here. I'll just actually drag that in. More of a stylized logo, but I can just dive into this particular element. And let me actually ungroup this. Just make my life a little bit easier. There's the logo there. A little bit too large, so I'm going to just shrink it down a touch and pop it into place. That could work. And then beside this, we may want, maybe a title, maybe the creator who's streaming, and then maybe the application that they are streaming as well. So very quickly, I'll do something like introducing video and Lottie in Adobe XD. Something like that, right? And then typeface-wise, we can go so many different directions. I actually had a question on Twitter someone sent me a few days ago, maybe it was yesterday, asking how many fonts can you use in a project. Now, I wasn't completely sure if this person meant how many can you technically use or how many should you use, right? The first answer is you can use as many as you want. The second answer is, should you use that many? Probably not. Typically if you're designing for a website or a mobile app, you want to stick in the 1 to 3 range. I would say 3 is the absolute max. Sometimes headers might have a more stylized typeface, and body text will have, more of a traditional one. Something like Helvetica is a pretty standard one. Open Sans or some use Museo. I've been using that a lot. They have Museo Sans or even Museo Sans Display. There are quite a few that you can definitely get away with, but you have to make sure that those are web-friendly typefaces. And if you go to Adobe Fonts, you can definitely sort by typefaces that are nice and web-friendly. All right, let's change this to white so it's nice and readable. And maybe for the title, I might want to go all caps. So right over here to the right inside of the Properties Inspector, boop, there we go. And we have all caps. I'll take a quick look at the preview. Looks not too bad. It looks a little bit small, but not terrible. And then right down below, I'm going to very quickly write my name. This one we probably don't want all caps, and this is more or less secondary information. So I'm going to just maybe go down to about 700 and maybe drop the size a little bit. And then finally, below that, Adobe XD, just to let users know that this is the application that we are working with. All right, and I may consider dropping this a little bit more, but I might want to keep these consistent, so we will run with this. All right, Omar says, I have a question. Why did you change the way the elements that you copy from Illustrator to XD behave? Was that changed? That's a good question. I haven't copied something from Illustrator to XD since the Adobe MAX update, so I'm not sure if it changed. Before it kept the group name and now it masks the elements and creates. To be honest, I don't know. I would ask the Adobe XD handle on Twitter to see if one of the product managers who worked on those features know. But I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you. I apologize. All right. So we have some information down here at the bottom. It looks a little bit small, but it could potentially work. Got a nice amount of room on the right. I may actually want to bring this over a little bit so we have a nice large video. All right. And now I think we should probably get on to some of the good stuff. So we can actually start populating this video, creating a component, maybe even several components with hover states and all sorts of things. Cornell's saying, those Lottie files that start with an empty frame are not visible while designing, so Lottie files, yes. So the short answer is the team is looking into that. Unfortunately, that's just the way Lottie files are created. You know, some of them start purposely to have a blank frame so that the animation can kind of come into play or into view. That's just the nature of Lottie files in general. You might see some of those while I'm adding some into this project today. But the team is definitely looking at ways, if there's a way to, you know, make it a little bit easier. Lottie files are a lot different than video, so they're looking into it. I don't have much of an answer at the moment, though. All right, so the first thing we might want to do is we might want to add an actual video into this rectangle. So I'm going to go ahead and hop over to Finder, and I do have a video right here. Now, I will remind all of you that at the moment, as of this masterclass, the limitations on videos are MP4s up to 15 megabytes in file size. So I did have to bring the original video into Adobe Media Encoder, and that was very simple to crunch that video down. And I'm going to bring that in, and whoop, there we go. And now we have a video in place. So Luca is confirming that groups of Illustrator are masked in XD. I'll see if I can ask somebody, but definitely, you know, hit up the Adobe XD Twitter account and see if anyone knows there. But after the stream, I will poke around and see if I can find out for you all. All right. Now, once you add a video into a shape in Adobe XD, we have an object mask over here. So I can click on the video, and then over to the right, we have a few different options. We can choose to play the video on tap. We can choose to play the video automatically or no playback at all. And for this one, we're actually going to go no playback. And the reason I'm doing that is because we're going to have a different state that will show maybe a thumbnail and a play button. And then maybe we'll even have a loading animation of some sort. And then to the left, we have our heads-up display. And, you know, I covered a lot of this before, but very quickly, you can set a thumbnail at the top left. You can scrub and also play the video, which is super cool. You can also trim the video, which is amazing that we're able to do this. So if you wanted to cut a little bit from the end or the beginning, or you wanted to start at a certain point, and then of course we can loop the video, which I'm going to, actually in this state, we probably don't need it, but we'll see. All right, so we have the video, it's set to no playback, but just to show you how it works, if I do have it set to play automatically and launch the preview, we have a playing video, which is amazing, right? All right. Wade says, I think that's Howard's actual living room. It is not. That one's not. That was an image from Adobe Stock, and then I composed, or I placed the video inside the TV that was on the wall. I wish my living room would look like this, but unfortunately it does not. All right, so we have that. Now I'm going to go ahead and set this back to no playback, because what I want to do here is create a component that starts off with a nice thumbnail and a play button. So we're going to start by let's go ahead and draw one out over top. And back in Finder, I do have this thumbnail that I used for this particular video. I'm gonna pop it into place, just like that. Now, you know what? I'm going to give it a little bit of a border, very subtle border, and I may also want to round out the corners of these elements just a little bit. Let's try about 16. 16 might be a little bit too much. I also want to round out the mask that the video is sitting in. It's not bad. I mean, the corners are definitely rounded. It's probably more rounded than you would probably see on a video player on Behance or on YouTube, but it kind of has a nice style. So we're going to leave it as is for now. And this is going to be called thumbnail. There we go. And then, you know, in some cases, when you have a video that's just a thumbnail before it starts playing, you'll have an overlay on top of it, and then you'll also have a play button. And, you know, typically the overlay is in place so that if the thumbnail is very busy, like this one is right here, the play button, you don't want the play button getting lost. So what we can do is I can actually duplicate this particular shape. And I'm going to set the brightness, I should set it all the way to black, and then just drop the opacity a little bit. Now that's one way of doing it. Another way of doing it is you can simply take the thumbnail, if nothing is behind it, and just drop the opacity a little bit as well. So definitely, you know, a few options there for you. Name this overlay. And that could potentially work. You can also have a gradient for the overlay as well. But then on top of this, what we might want is that play button. So I'm going to very quickly draw out an ellipse. And if I want to make sure that this ellipse is centered inside of this thumbnail, I can either move this around until those smart guides help me out, or what I can do is I can select the ellipse that I have here, hold down my shift key, click on the either overlay or thumbnail behind it, and then right at the top right-hand corner, we have our alignment and distribution option, so I can center it vertically and horizontally like that. Perfect. Now, when you're designing elements like this, you want to make sure that you don't go too crazy with it. You want to keep it fairly simple, otherwise it's going to get lost and going to be very difficult to see. So we'll do something very simple, maybe, you know, a white ellipse. We'll see what that looks like. And then on the inside, we may want the actual play button. Of course, you can grab an icon, or you can draw one out with the polygon tool, shortcut key Y. I'll rotate that a little bit. Maybe I will round out the corners just a touch by pulling on these handles. And then maybe we'll set the color to a nice blue. Oops, I missed it. There we go. Nice and simple, right? All right, that looks pretty good. Let's see. Function of Lottie in video works in Behance. Then I post work from XD to my portfolio. So you might be talking about the embedding. You can actually embed your XD prototype on your portfolio as long as whichever portfolio service or website service you're using supports HTML embeds. And that should work just like it does on Behance, so all of the interaction should work properly. But if it doesn't, definitely either let me know or let someone on Twitter know, and we'll take a quick look. Now, one more thing. Umacorn's asking about the same question. Okay, so one more thing I want to mention in, when creating elements like this is when you might notice on the right-hand side, there's a little bit of breathing room over there. So if you were to snap it to the center, right, visually, it doesn't look exactly the way you would think it would, right? So in cases like this, you just want to move it over just a little bit so that visually it is in the center. And that looks pretty good right there. All right, I'm going to group these two elements. We'll call this play. And I think we're good to go. So we have our thumbnail, we have our overlay, and we have our play button. And now what we want to do is we want to start creating this component so that initially the thumbnail displays, and then when it's tapped on, it's going to transition to the video, and then that's going to automatically play. So what we want to do is we want to take all these elements, including the play button, the overlay, the thumbnail, and also the video, which is currently hidden, and we want to place all of those into a larger component. So I'm going to select all of them inside of my layers panel, And then I can either create a component with the plus button over to the right. I can do that inside of my document assets right over here, or the Command or Control K shortcut. And there's the shortcut right there. So I'm going to name this video. And we've already done the work in setting up our default state. Again, this is the thumbnail with the overlay and the play button. And now we want to transition to our playing state. So within the Properties Inspector, one more time, I'm going to press the plus button and I'm going to create a new state. And this is going to be called playing. And now what we want to do is we want to change the elements and show the actual video and then hide some of these other elements like the play button and the overlay. So very easily, I'm going to dive in here, hide the play button, we're going to hide the overlay, we're going to hide the thumbnail, and then we're going to bring back that video. Now, what's very important here is on the default state, we set the video to no playback. So we want to make sure to go in here, select the video, and then change the playback to play automatically. And we can also, customize some of the additional settings like looping and audio and trimming and that sort of thing. But I think everything looks pretty good right here. And with that, we now have our two states. We have our default state and we have our playing state, right? So what we want to do now is we want to make sure that this is actually wired up. So when we launch the prototype, because if we launch it right now, nothing really happens, right? We want to make sure that we can interact with this element. So inside of prototype mode, what we're going to do is we can either select the entire component or we can select the individual element like the play button. Now, in most cases, when you're dealing with a video player, the entire element is clickable, whether you want to pause the video or play the video. So we're going to select the entire component. I'm going to click on the blue handle over to the right, and we're going to choose a tap trigger. And in this case, we don't really have anything that's going to be animating. So we're going to stick with a simple transition and we'll do maybe none for the actual animation. We want to make sure that we choose our state, which is our playing state. There we go. And now if we press play, we can click. It's going to transition to the video and it's automatically going to play, which is really nice. Now, one additional thing you sometimes see on video players, you might see it on Behance, you might see it on YouTube, you might see it on various places, is when the transition happens between the default state and the playing state, there's sometimes a little bit of either a loading animation or buffering, right? So we might want to incorporate some of that into this workflow just to make it feel a little bit more realistic. So what we're going to do is we're going to create another state and we'll call this loading. And on this one, we want to hide the play button. We're going to keep the overlay. We might want to actually hide the thumbnail and then bring back the video. So we don't want the video to play right away. So we're going to make sure that it's still set to no playback, but we do want that overlay a little bit. Maybe we'll drop the opacity just a touch. But right in the middle, like I mentioned, we might want that loading animation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a rectangle. I'm going to draw one out. And this is mainly so that when I do bring in a Lottie animation, I can very easily mask it at the size that I want it. Now, the big question is, where do you get Lottie animations? There are a few places. LottieFiles.com is probably your best bet. They have a ton of free Lottie animations you can get. There is a Lottie Files plugin, and right here, so in your plugins, you can hit the plus button at the top, and you can install the Lottie Files plugin. You can look for something like loading, right? Now, what I will mention is, at this moment, there are a few bugs with the Lottie Files plugin that they're very actively working on. Specifically, you may have seen at the very beginning, when it loaded, some of these are blank. They haven't loaded in the actual images just yet. But if you do look up something like loading or buffering or something like that, you will get some animations that you can just drag directly into Adobe XD, which is great, right? Drew is saying, am I demonstrating the clever hack for looping animations? I may not get to that today, but there is a video on YouTube that you can definitely watch. And I also have some Lottie animations on right over here. And I believe in this folder here, I have a nice loading animation, one from UI8.com and also one from Lottie Files. And if you take a look, this is a Lottie file, right? They're typically made in an application like After Effects. and they're exported using a plugin or extension like Lottie files or body movement, and they're mostly SVG and vector based. So it's all mathematics and it's all code. None of it makes any sense if you just look at it. But what's cool about this is this one in particular is 12 kilobytes in file size. So they're incredibly small files and they look great, right? So let's go ahead and grab, let's say, this Lottie file and boop, pop it into place. And just like with videos, I can dive in here, select the actual file, and then enlarge it, make it smaller. And then over to the right, I have the same options to play on tap, automatically, or no playback. Now, for this particular animation, because we want the loading animation to kick off right as the state loads, we're going to choose play automatically. And what's important here is we do not want this animation to loop. And the reason we don't want it to loop is because after this loading animation plays, we want it to automatically transition to the playing state where the video is going to be playing. So if it were to be looping, then we'd never be able to make that transition, right? All right, so we have our loading animation in place, and just to kind of show you what it's going to look like, basically that, right? Nothing special, but it's a nice loading animation. Luca's saying, where can I create my personal Lottie? So like I mentioned, Lottie files are typically created in After Effects. So if you do know After Effects, you can definitely make your animations there. And then you can use the Lottie files extension to export them as JSON files and then bring them into XD. Or you can actually upload them directly to your Lottie files account from After Effects and then access them in Adobe XD as well. Lots of different ways to do it. Maybe one day we'll be able to do it directly from XD, but at the moment it's just not possible. All right, so again, loading animation. But we're missing a few bits and pieces here and there. We're missing those transitions. So the first thing we're missing is we are missing the transition from this state to the loading state. Now, previously we did create a transition from this state to the playing state, so we can very easily just change this to our loading state, right? So now, click loading. But now what, right? We need that one more step to get to our video. And that's where the end of playback trigger comes into play. And I think a lot of people haven't really explored the end of playback trigger a lot. And I think it's one of the kind of hidden gems in the Adobe MAX update. Not only does it allow you to transition your videos and Lottie animations automatically to another state or another artboard, but there's also, some of you may have seen this, a way you can kind of use that little bit of a hack to transition regular components to different states as well. YouTube.com/Howard Pinsky. Definitely watch that video if you're into prototyping. It's a fun little hack. Is there a way to make chat writing prototype in Adobe XD? So Solomon, you can use a mask and have it kind of enlarge to show, gradually show the text layer, but there isn't a very easy way of doing like letter by letter. But I think if you do a mask and you make the animation fast enough, then it'll look pretty believable. Maybe I'll get to that if I have some time at the end. So going back to our loading state in prototype mode, what we want to do is we want to select the Lottie animation. And what you're going to notice is there's already a time trigger on this animation. And this is what allows this animation to kick off as the state or artboard loads, right? But what we want to do here is click on the blue plus button to the right, and then inside of the properties inspector, we want to choose that end of playback trigger. And this is essentially, it's going to perform the action right down here once the Lottie animation is complete. Drew says, was that by design or a happy little accident? So if you're referring to the prototyping hack, that's probably a happy little accident. I actually showed, when I did think of that idea, I showed a few people who were working on the Lottie feature, and I don't believe they even thought of that. I don't know if they want us talking about it, but it's in the program, so I'm going to talk about it. So anyways, we chose the end of playback trigger, and then we want to customize the action. Now again, nothing really to animate, so we'll choose a simple transition, and we're going to choose our playing state and no animation. We could do a dissolve or something like that, but we'll just do simple cuts. And with that, we now have our 3 states. And now we can go ahead and launch the preview one more time. Click, It's going to load and then automatically transition to the playing state once that Lottie animation finishes. All right, very good. Masayu, is End of Playback available for video playback for separated artboard? Yes. So what you can do, now this video is very long, but what we can do is, I can make an artboard just to show you. I'll use the loading Lottie animation just as an example, even though it still works with videos. Instead of the End of Playback trigger going to a different state, we can actually choose this additional artboard over here, so that when this playback finishes, it's going to transition to the artboard. So you can either have the End of Playback trigger transition to a different state or a different artboard, completely up to you and your prototype. All right, so this is all looking fine and dandy, looking pretty good, but there might be a few additional things that we may want to add into this. Specifically, you may have remembered at the beginning when I showed off the final product, there was a bit of an overlay at the bottom. Well, I'm using my Magic Mouse right now because my Logitech mouse died, and it's so sensitive. I don't like it. I've got to get a new mouse. But you know, if you're on Behance right now, or if you're watching this on YouTube, if you just hover over the video, you'll see controls at the bottom. You'll see a timeline sometimes, depending on if it's a live stream or not, and you'll see some additional things here and there. And we may want to create something like that as well. So let's go ahead and do that. What we're going to do to start is we're going to create the overlay. Now, in some cases, the overlay extends all the way to the top, and you might have something like we showed at the beginning where it's, an overlay, right? Or what you might also have is you might have it maybe a third of the way from the bottom, and you might have a bit of a gradient. So both colors will be set to black, but the color at the bottom will be much darker, and the color at the top will be essentially at 0, right? Just like that. Now it's looking a little bit weird right now because we already have an overlay and a thumbnail behind it. So just for now, we'll go over to the playing state just so we can see this nicely. And I'm going to make sure that the corner radius matches the video in the background. And then on this overlay, which I'm going to name overlay, we may want a few elements. We might want, a bar at the bottom, and then inside of that, there might be maybe a live indicator, maybe the timeline, a pause button, a rewind button, that sort of thing, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my good old rectangle tool. Let's draw one out across this artboard. Let me zoom in so we can really see what's going on here. And by the way, if anyone hears any noises in the background that sounds like a swarm of bees, thankfully they are not bees. We do have some construction going on, and whatever machine they're using sounds like wasps, which is not fun. I'm going to round out these corners ever so slightly. Let's try 8. And then in terms of the color, let's go for a nice darker color. So we'll do something like this. And then the border, we're going to add a very subtle border. That could work. Perfect. And then let's go ahead and just start from the left-hand side and move our way on over. Now, in this particular case, this might be a live stream. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just create a little badge right in this area here. Now let's see. So this is all right, and let's drop that down to about 40. Not great numbers, but they'll do. 9, no. Let's go for 8. Oops, wrong way. Perfect. And if anyone's wondering, if you want to resize your elements by either 1 pixel or 10 pixels at a time, if you hold down your command key and then use your arrows, it'll resize by 1 pixel, and then command shift or control shift on Windows, and the arrow keys will resize by 10 pixels, just like this, which is kind of nice. All right, I'm going to round out these corners a touch as well. Let's go for about 4, just so that visually they kind of match the shape on the outside. Possibly 6, we'll see what that looks like. And typically live stream badges are something like red, or if you're on a platform like Twitch, they might be purple, but we'll do something like red. And because we're designing against a darker background, what you typically don't want to do is go view. It doesn't look too bad, but the very vibrant red against the darker background can be a little bit of an eyesore. So you might want to just pull out some of the saturation a little bit, just like that, right? And then on the inside, type out the word live, not in pink or purple, because that is not going to be readable. There we go. And then I'm actually going to hop over to Nucleo for a second, and let's see, do we have any live broadcast? No. Maybe Font Awesome has some. Nope. Stream. I know there's, oh, here we go. So something like this could work. And if you don't have any icons in an icon library or on your computer, the Icons for Design plugin is wonderful. So very quickly, if I hop over here, Icons for Design and Stream. Nope. Live. Sort of. Broadcast. There's sort of one. Maybe Cast. There are some. Now, all of these are free. They're all open source, so some of them might be limited, but I'm going to go ahead and copy this to my clipboard, paste it into, oops, don't want to paste it in there. I want to paste it right here, and bring it on. All right, I'm going to change this color to white so we can see it against the red background. And this is another area where you can potentially use a Lottie file so that, you know, you have a kind of like a live or streaming icon that kind of pulsates or does something. If you want to go that far with it, you can definitely do something like that, which could look kind of fun. Ooh, that is way too big. See, this is one of those cases where you definitely want to check your preview once in a while, because that's not working. So let's bring this down quite a bit. Let's try about 16. Maybe. That could potentially work. This is probably too big too. I think that's still too big. I think the overall container is just too big as well. All right. Oops, that's one password. That's not what I want. That's what I want. All right, that's a little bit better. Still not great, but it will do. All right, let's see. Why live text is always on a red background? That's a good question. You know, I don't know. I think just live is, like broadcasts are always red for some reason. Don't know where that came from. That's an interesting question. I don't have an answer to that. All right, so we've got our live badge, and I want to make sure to keep things organized, so I'm going to select all these elements, group, and this will be called live. And then over to the right, this doesn't look centered. Yeah, it's good enough for now. Or is it? I don't know. Probably is. That'll do. Not centered, but it'll do. Over to the right, we might want a few icons, pause, fast forward, go to the next video, that sort of thing. Now, a pause icon, pretty simple, right? What we can do is 2 rectangles. Maybe I'll round out the corners a little bit. Pause icon. It's not the nicest icon in the world, but it will do, right? And of course, like I mentioned earlier, you can use the Icons for Design plugin. A little bit too tall, I think. All right. And then we might want, let's see, what would it be called? Like forward, maybe? Nope. Next. Nope. Arrow. I think this icon set is fairly limited, so let's try Font Awesome. Here we go. Something like this could work, or this could work. So this one's forward step, this one's forward. Let's run with it. And these icons, this icon here, just like the pause icon, pretty simple to create. It's basically just 2 polygons that we can create with the polygon tool. So that could work. All right. Oops. They still look a little bit too large. I think all of these icons in general are just a bit large. Okay, that'll do. Don't want to waste too much time on these icons. Now, to the right of this, we might want the actual timeline. Now, if you're watching a live stream, typically you would just see, a solid red bar unless you have paused it and then allowed the video to play, and then you're kind of behind a little bit. But to make that simple, with the line tool, draw one out. And I might go ahead and sample this red color over here, or if I do have it saved in my document assets, which I should certainly do, I can apply it from there as well. All right. Now, over to the far right-hand corner, what we might want here is icons for things like settings and volume, maybe recommended videos, maybe a clapping emoji, which we might get some Lottie animations in there, and then maybe a way to expand that actual video. So very quickly, let's hop over one more time. Settings, nope, I think it's here, that's what I'm looking for. So there's some there, there's also, this one's kind of fun here, maybe I'll go for this one. Right, and then we might want volume, if I can spell correctly, volume. There we go. And then, I think it was actually menu. This one here. Flat. Ooh, those are very large icons. And maybe we'll just leave it at these 4, right? We'll quickly change the color to white. Now, what we want to make sure to do is not only align these icons like this, we want to make sure that they're all spaced out, right? So I have the clapping icon towards the right, almost where I want it. Let's do about, I think on the other side it was 8, but that might be a bit too squishy. Maybe we'll do 16. And then we'll do about, let's try 24 in between each icon. As we move them closer, the smart guides and smart padding let us know that those are nicely aligned. And that looks pretty good. Not terrible, but not great. Not great, but not terrible. There we go, that's what I'm trying to say. All right, now on these particular icons, what we might want to do is we might want to actually set up, a hover state and also actual, a tap trigger. So let's actually go for the clapping icon, because that's where we can actually start integrating additional Lottie animations. So on this one here, what we might want to do first is set up that hover state. So I do have this icon selected, and if I press the plus button over to the right to create a component, it already looks pretty good in terms of the initial state. So let's press the plus button one more time and create a new hover state. And for this one, we're going to keep this simple. We don't want to go too crazy with these hover states. So the nice thing is these icons are vector based. So I can, select some of these, maybe move them up a little bit, move that out, move this out a little bit, and possibly select these points and maybe, ooh, missed one. That was weird. Boop, there we go. Right? So if you take a look, if you notice, you just have a look at that. It's fine, right? It's a nice little hover effect. But we don't have to go through anything fancy with it. But what we do want to do is once we have hovered and we're ready to click on this particular element, we might want an additional state that has some, clapping emojis that kind of flies out. And this is where more Lottie animations can come into play. So let's create one more new state, and we'll call this clapping. And what we want to do now is we actually want to find another Lottie animation. So let's actually switch over back to our plugins. Let's try the Lottie files plugin one more time. And let's try clapping. There we go. So we have that one there. And I know there is one that has a bunch of clapping emojis kind of like floating up. Let's see if I can find it. I know it's around somewhere. Let me take a quick peek to see if I did download it. Do I have the clapping emoji here? Do we see claps? I do not see it. Okay, that's fine. I guess while we are talking about Lottie files, let's actually go over here and let's look up lottiefiles.com. And I can kind of show you the workflow of if my internet wants to load Lottie files. That's a whole other story. It's always awkward when websites just don't want to load while you're trying to stream. Come on, Lottie files. I hope no one from Lottie files is watching the stream right now. I may have broken your website. Anyways, let's just go ahead and choose that first clapping emoji. This one right here could... Oh, here we go. I found it. The floating claps. Should have known. All right, let's create a rectangle just so I can house this animation. Now, this kind of goes back to what it might have been Cornell was talking about earlier. When you have some Lottie files or Lottie animations, they start off purposely empty, right? Let's move this into here. And we want to make sure that we have it set to play automatically. And very similar to our video example, what we want to do now is make sure to actually wire these all up. So from the hover state, you can also do this from the default state. We're going to select the icon down at the bottom. We're going to click, and we're going to simply transition to our clapping state, right? So now if I go ahead and press play, I can hover and then click, and there are the little clapping emojis, which is really nice. Let's do it one more time. Let me zoom in here and hover, right? And click. There they go. Whee! Fancy. That could do. And I could dive in here if I did want them a little bit larger. I can make this mask a bit bigger. Make that a bit bigger as well. And there we go. That's a little bit better. Let's do that one more time. Look at that. Now, what you might be noticing right now is after I initiated that clapping emoji, right? I can't click on it again because it's still on that clapping state. And this is another opportunity to use that end of playback trigger. So back in prototype mode, again, we have our time trigger, and I can click on the blue plus button, end of playback, and then just make sure that it automatically transitions to the default state once the clapping animation is complete. So again, hover, oops, I'm on the wrong state. Hover, click, right? Animation kicks off. It's going to automatically transition back to the first, so I can continue doing that just like that, right? Perfect. All right. Now, one more thing that, I saw a few questions in the last masterclass and also on YouTube, is many of you wanted to know if you can create hover effects with Lottie animation. And the answer is absolutely. So very quickly, right down here at the bottom, let's create a button. So I'm going to draw out a button like this. And this might be like a contribute button. So if you want to contribute to this creator, you can very easily do so. And for here, let's choose a nice, maybe we'll go for like a purple. Something like this. We'll round to the corners a little bit. That might be a bit too much, actually. Let's go for 4. And we'll type out contribute. Button's a little bit too large. And I'm also not loving the color. Now, over to the left of this particular text layer, what we might want is maybe a Lottie animation that is static at first, but when you hover over top of it, it maybe rotates or does something fancy, right? So actually back in Finder, I do have this animation here. This one was also from lottiefiles.com. You can find it in the plugin or on their website. And what's kind of cool is, I wish it was working. Oh, here we go. What's kind of cool, I do want to show this off because this is kind of neat. Let me actually find that. I think it was gem or diamond or something like that. I don't know, it's one of these. But regardless, what's kind of neat about this is on Lottie files, if you select one of these, not only can you preview the Lottie animation, but down here at the bottom, you can actually edit the layer color, which is super cool. Or if you go to lottiefiles.com/editor or edit.lottiefiles.com, right down here, you can actually edit these colors. So I can change this to maybe blue, right? Change this one to green. We're gonna make this present very ugly. Purple. And then we'll do, I don't know, this color here, right? And then once you've changed all these colors, you can actually just press this download button right here. It's going to download that Lottie file to your computer, and you can use the updated animation, which is super cool. So if you don't love the colors of the original Lottie file, go ahead and change them. All right, back over to XD very quickly. So I do have this Lottie animation, which I did make a very minor edit to. And what I want to do is place it right to the left of the text, right about here. Let me actually make this a little bit squishier. Now, initially, I do not want this Lottie animation playing, right? So I'm going to make sure that it's set to no playback, just like that. Let's take a quick look. It looks okay. And the way to create a hover effect, like we showed earlier, is to create a component. So I'm going to select all these layers right here, create a component within the Properties Inspector or Command or Control K. And then what I want to happen is when this button is hovered over, it's going to animate. So I'm going to choose the hover state. And then inside of here, this is where I want to dive in, select that Lottie file, and then choose Play Automatically. And I probably also want the Lottie animation to loop, so that as my cursor remains on top of this button, it's going to continue rotating in a circle, right? So I want to make sure to turn looping on, like that. And now, if I press play, let me zoom in here, and I can hover, and there is the Lottie animation. And as it gets to the end, it loops around really nicely. Now, what you may have noticed is, as I hovered over top of it, the Lottie animation didn't kick off immediately. It wasn't too bad, right? But there's a little bit of a delay, and that's because hover effects are wired up by default with auto animate. So if you just switch over to prototype mode, switch from auto animate to transition, and then set the animation at none, now it should kick off almost instantaneously, which is nice. Now we have 2 minutes left. I wonder if we can create exploding confetti in 2 minutes. I think we can do it. Let's try. So what I would also want is right over here, there might be another button. And this one might be like a follow button. I'll do that. And then we might want maybe a heart and a little bit of an Easter egg. If you create a polygon and then enter less than 3 in the Properties Inspector, boop, you've got a heart, which is fancy, right? All right, we're gonna zip through this because I wanna make some confetti explode. And I know Kyle T. Webster is probably waiting for me to wrap up. I apologize, Kyle. I'm gonna do this in like 2 minutes. We will do this. All right, so this is the initial state, right? No confetti, right? Not yet. Component, bam. New state, confetti. Now in here, what we want is we want the confetti to explode over top of this video. So inside of this state or this component, I'm going to create a rectangle over the video, just like this. And I do have another Lottie animation. This one, I believe, is from UI 8. There are a few of them. Let's try this one here. Now we can't see it. It's another example of a blank starting frame. But if we go to our default state, we'll select our button, click. Let's transition to the second state. Let's see what happens before we make any tweaks. Nothing. Oh, I had it set to hover. Not a good idea. Bam. Confetti! Not bad, right? I might want to make that a little bit bigger. So diving in here. And kaboom! You gotta have confetti. If you have Lottie in XD, you got to have exploding confettis and hovers and all sorts of different clapping effects and things like that. It just makes your experience that much better. But with that, I'm going to wrap things up. Again, Kyle T. Webster is coming up in just a few minutes. A big thank you to everyone who has tuned in, especially to those who stuck around to the end to see the exploding confetti. I promise every single masterclass there will be confetti. I don't know if I'm going to keep that promise, but that's going to wrap it up for me for today. Thanks again, everyone, and I will see you all next week.